Hello and welcome here on Inkish this Friday afternoon, where I have a pleasure of talking to Axel from Ingede in Germany, a guy that I have wanted to talk to for a long time. And now, finally, we found a time spot where we were both available. Even we had a little hiccup this morning about the timings, but Axel, welcome here on Inkish.
Thank you. Thank you for having me with you.
One of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you is because um, when we in the printing industry talk about sustainability, sustainability is just not the ink or the machine or the paper. It is actually the entire process from, let's say, from the virgin fibers or the recycled fibers of some paper till you have disposed the paper, de-inked the paper, and made them into new recyclables. And I guess that you are the kind of, let's say, the authority, and you have a lot of members from the paper industry. So you speak with some weight, right?
Yeah, a little. Yeah, don't overestimate it. But we've been doing this for many years now, and we work with the competent bodies as well, with the organizations that give out eco labels and advise them what is good, because it's about the paper cycle. Yeah? We,
Mhm.
as a print and paper cycle, we are in a very heavy competition with electronic media. And the thing is, um, if your paper is not recyclable anymore, then you lose your advance versus the digital media. Yeah?
Mhm.
If the only chance what you can do with your printed product afterwards is to burn it, then you can burn your iPods and your phones and your laptops and see anything on electronic media. Yeah?
Mhm.
But the big advantage of printed paper is that you can recycle it, yeah? Which
Mhm.
you cannot do with your iPads and your electronic stuff. Yeah? And you
Mhm.
consume a lot of energy with digital media. And
Mhm.
if you talk about marketing, about flyers from discounting store, you don't reach a certain group of buyers with electronic media. So there are many
Mhm.
advantages of paper, of
Mhm.
printed paper, and to keep these advantages, we would have to keep paper recyclable. That's very
Mhm.
important. Yeah.
Mhm. So just for me to understand, because I mean, if you look at the life cycle of a paper, let's say that now we have collected all the papers in our bins at the households, and we have the
Mhm.
newspapers and the brochures, all these papers that we want to recycle. What happens then? Because most people, when they have disposed the garbage, I don't think a lot of people actually know what happens. So what happens with the paper side of it?
Yeah, the paper. The first thing is the paper will be sorted because you cannot make a graphic paper, bright paper from packaging, from brown packaging. You cannot de-ink a brown packaging, which is unbleached fiber. So you have to sort packaging and graphic white paper, and then from the packaging you produce more packaging, corrugated, and from the white fraction you produce again white paper for copy paper, for yeah,
Mm-hmm.
newspaper, which gets less and less because people don't read newspapers anymore. That's a big problem, also
Mm-hmm.
for the supply of paper for recycling, and also hygiene papers, yeah, toilet paper also.
Mm-hmm.
It's
So,
also a problem in the hygiene paper industry that they uh, are struggling for raw material. Yeah?
mm-hmm.
In the early days, you had your newspaper and then it had an end use. You tore it in stripes and then you had an end use. And today, this connection is not as clear anymore that you need one for the other.
Mm. So if we focus a little bit on the let's say the
The process.
sorted paper of that has now been
Mm-hmm.
going into being white papers, all of these papers have, of course, print on them, or many of
Mm-hmm.
them have at least. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So who are they delivered to? Are they delivered to a paper mill, or is it a special plant that processes them? What is going on now?
It's a paper mill that recycles paper. Yeah? You have basically two kinds of paper mills. You have the kind mostly in Scandinavia that use fresh fiber, and you have in Central Europe you have many mills. They're getting less and less that produce graphic paper from the urban forest from paper for recycling.
Mm,
And I wouldn't play one against the other. We need fresh fiber paper to keep the recycling cycle running. We always need a constant influx, and also it depends on the purpose of the paper you use it for. If you really want a printed product with a high brightness, then use fresh fiber. Yeah, it doesn't make sense to produce a very high brightness during recycling. Okay, so you have these two mills, and then you have a paper mill that produces, for instance, copy paper or newsprint. Yeah? There, you have a big storage first, with where the truckloads of paper, of sorted paper coming from the sorting plant, will be stored, and then you have a caterpillar feeding conveyor belt that goes into a drum, a big drum or a big pot where the paper is dissolved. So in the storage, that's very important. You have several parts. One part is for the household, the sorted paper coming from the households, and another part is the printer waste. Yeah? So printer waste usually has higher brightness. There's lots of unprinted edges in there. The paper is usually thicker than the household paper. And so this is a very good quality, and it's used to upgrade your household waste to get a higher brightness from that. And this is the reason why it is especially important that the paper coming from the printers is good recyclable and is good deinkable. Yeah, because otherwise you would pay a lot of money for the printer waste. It's worth more than the sorted household waste. And you would downgrade your paper. Yeah, that would be ridiculous.
So basically that means that you have one source is, let's say, the household paper that has been collected.
Correct.
And a not insignificant part of the source. The second source is basically whenever you see at a printing company where you have waste is basically collected and sent to the mills, and then when they are mixed together, they become, like, say, the quality grade of, let's say, whiteness and all the properties.
It's like a cooking process. Yeah, for a certain brightness of paper, you have your recipe, and this is 5 shovels of household waste and 1 shovel of printer waste. Yeah, and then you end up at a certain brightness from experience. Okay.
When you put these two paper sources or papers into this drum or that pot you was talking about, and you dissolve it, is that basically a process where you dissolve it using water, or how is that done?
Yeah, you create a paper soup. Yeah, some people say a paper sludge or so. No, it's a soup. It's 99% water and 1% fiber. Yeah, so you can pump it, and you add a little caustic to make the fiber swell. Yeah, and then when my belly swells, it bursts off the shirt. Yeah, and the same thing happens with the printing inks. Yeah, the fibers swell and they loosen the printing ink, and then you have a little bit of silica in there that helps agglomerating the ink particles, and then you have soap in there. And
so does that mean that just because you have that caustic into that soup, that basically makes a small chemical reaction that basically allows the paper to, let's say, free up the ink, then that is then in the soup, but as, let's say, free particles or free ingredients in the soup that can later be taken out of the soup. Is that how it works, or?
Yes, but it's not only a little shot of caustic. Yeah, so that's not the basic process. The basic process is more what comes now is the soap.
Okay.
Because it's like washing your hands. The soap collects the dirt. You have particles. The important thing is that you have ink particles. The paper is dissolved, then you have some mechanical devices like screens and centrifugal forces to get out staples and sand and some adhesives and everything that is contaminating your paper. And then we come to the key process, which is the flotation, where you remove the printing ink. And that is where you have this hydrophobia and ink particle get me out of here thing. Yeah, we pump air through it, so there are bubbles going to it. And with the soap that I already mentioned, you have soap bubbles going up. And this is what the ink particle sees. Yeah, it's the taxi to the surface. Yeah, and then the poor ink particle hangs on to the bubble and gets lifted up to the surface. Yeah? And then at the surface you have this dark foam where all the ink is being collected, and then this foam is being skimmed off. And this is being repeated over and over and over in one cell after the other. And then the fibers are getting brighter and brighter, and the foam is getting brighter and brighter. And in the end, you have to, after 16 steps or so, and sometimes there's also another device in between that grinds down visible ink particles into smaller particles. So, but in the end, then you have the cleaner fibers. But this process requires that you have ink particles. Yeah, and not
so it has
soluble
so it has
ink. It works only with particles of a certain size, and the particles have to be hydrophobic. Yeah, so it doesn't work.
Because I was just about to say that the hydrophobic thing is a very important part of it, because that is basically what makes it comes to the surface, so you can basically remove it. Just a question of curiosity. How white is the last after the 16th? Is it close to virgin, or is it how big is the degradation from a virgin fiber when we look at the whiteness? I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's different. It depends on how often you repeat that process, and it depends on the raw material. Yeah? And for newspaper, you know how white a newspaper is. Huh?
Yeah.
And in Central Europe, newspapers are made out of 100% recycled fibers. And maybe not in Scandinavia where you are, but here you have been in Berlin. You mentioned before. You probably saw a newspaper there. All the German newspapers are recycled paper.
Okay.
So it's a little grayish and not bright white, but it's sufficient for your tax statements, for instance. Yeah, when in Germany you get your tax statement from the authorities, it's all printed on recycled paper, recycled copy paper.
Okay.
And you can make it brighter if you repeat this process more and more, but then it gets less sustainable.
Yeah, of course.
And that's why I said in the beginning, you have to have certain applications for fresh fiber where you need a high brightness, and you have applications for recycled paper where the brightness is not the key element, for magazines, newspapers, tax statements.
Axel, I can't help think about, because I mean, recycling is of course not like a new thing to us. But I guess that recycling of fibers has not always been around. I guess that in the old times, did also paper mills at the time use recycled fibers, or is it something that has come with let's say, a higher understanding of both the resource that it is that can be used and has a value? So I mean, how old is the recycling idea on paper?
I think it was in the 70s or so. But it was not for environmental reasons in the first place. It was more to use the raw material, to use the urban forest, to use all the fibers that were already available, because it was cheaper. But the industry only does things for cost reasons, not for environmental reasons, unless they are forced to.
Yeah.
And here you have lots of red newspapers. Those days, everybody had a daily newspaper. And those were pretty good fibers, to use again. And then the recycling process was commercialized. The inking was already invented in, I think, 1600 something or 1700 or so. But the big commercial processes started about in the 70s, when the collected paper from the streets was a cheap raw material. And it didn't make sense to burn it, everything.
Of course not, yeah. The reason I'm asking is just because, I mean, I totally agree that and understand that in the beginning it was maybe more because of I mean it hurts when you throw out something of value, right? And
Mm-hmm.
if you can use something not for the recycling but for an economic gain, that is often a driver in our societies, of course, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Then we started to look into to the recycling also as an environmental
Mm-hmm.
an important part of how we see our societies of today.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, we start seeing also different types of printing techniques. Because I mean, when in the 70s, it was letterpress, it was offset, it was
Mm-hmm.
flexography. I mean, it was like analog processes with. I mean, I know, of course, at the time also inks were different at that time in how they were the components of and the solvents that were used for it. But I mean, when you I don't know how long have you been with Ingede, but if you look back at, let's say, earlier days before it became like an environmental and before the digital started coming in, what were the biggest challenges at that time
Yeah.
from a de-inking perspective, of course?
From a de-inking perspective,
Mm.
the reason why Ingede was founded actually in 1989 was the invention of flexoprinting for daily newspapers.
Mm-hmm.
And these flexo inks have a binder that decomposes in the de-inking process and sets free the primary pigments. And these primary pigments are hydrophilic. So even small amounts of flexo newsprints can mess up the whole de-inking process.
Wow.
And at that time, there was the Daily Mail in the UK going flexo and La Repubblica in Italy. And then the paper recyclers were alarmed and said, hey, we have a big problem here. And this cannot be solved by one paper mill by itself. We have to join forces and make an association. And that was the time when Ingede was founded in 1989, just to have a stronger voice versus the printer associations and confront them with the problems of flexo printing in newspapers. Because
Mm.
if that process would have continued and most of the newspapers in Central Europe would have turned flexo, then
Mm.
you could have shut down all the recycling mills.
Mm.
And it ended with an agreement in Germany, an unwritten agreement that German publishers will not use flexoprinting for their newspapers. And so we are still where we have been in '89 with Daily Mail Evening Standard in the UK and Flexo and La Repubblica in Italy and some smaller ones.
So they are the two ones that are using flexo, and the rest of them are staying in offset, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Correct.
I think it is a great what you say, because I mean, if you look at, let's say, this gentleman agreement, I mean, you could probably not. Then you should go to legislators and ask them to help you. But I mean, that is always good when you can make a gentleman agreement and then people stick to it.
Mm-hmm.
Now the things is maybe challenging you one more time as Ingede, because basically since many years different types of digital print has evolved, and
Mm-hmm.
where you say that you have large volumes of offset and also different types of printing technologies in analog. Now, when you have a lot of different short runs that are printed on different substrates with different finishing, with different digital print technologies, does that also, let's say, challenge the de-inkers and Ingede as an organization, how to solve and how to address these problems?
Yes, some do and some don't. And you said two important terms. The first is small amounts,
Mm-hmm.
and the second is different technologies.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have one technology, no matter how it works, you can adjust the process to a certain technology. And
Mm-hmm.
currently, most of the paper waste is offset and similar technologies. And
Mm-hmm.
if you then all of a sudden come up with 1% of inkjet, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
you cannot change the process for the 1% of inkjet
No.
only because all the inkjet dies, you're stuck. Yeah? You have a
No.
small amount with a very strong effect.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you have to do is you have to avoid this type of ink by, for instance, communicating the problems that inkjet makes that the developers did not think about sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been doing that for quite a while. And some printer companies have picked up the idea, and like OC, which is now Canon, in Germany, we worked pretty close together with OC in Germany and in the Netherlands, and tested during the development with them. And so they do now have some very good de-inkable, recyclable inkjet processes. And I just don't want to have them standing alone. We work with other printer companies as well, and we have been working very closely with Cycon, and Cycon stopped one development of UV inkjet because they found out that it doesn't work with the current recycling process. Yeah, so they omitted the complete thing and tried to concentrate on better recyclable processes. And this is, for instance, dry toner. Yeah? Dry toner is perfect in the recycling process. Yeah? The dry toner layer breaks into the pieces that have the right size to be removed, that have the right hydrophobicity to be removed. So dry toner is the perfect digital printing technology. So nobody can say Ingede is against digital or so. Yeah.
No. But Axel, the reason I'm asking about these things is because, as I said in the beginning, I think it's first of all, I think it's truly important that we understand that when we talk about sustainability, you cannot separate the product. I mean, you cannot have a printer that is perfect until the de-inking side, and then it doesn't work, right? Then it's not sustainable. We're going to talk about some issues as well during either today or next time we see each other. But I can't help think about, because one of the things that I also think has changed a lot since the 70s and 80s when you were founded is also the legislation, and legislators are way more concerned about the sustainability, and probably also interested in the de-inking process. How much are you working with legislators in order to also influence legislation in order to make sure that the recycling process is as good as it can be?
Yeah, let's put it the other way around. The legislators, or if you call it legislators, the competent bodies for eco labels. For me, an eco label is some kind of a soft legislation. Yeah, it's not a law, but if you want to sustain in the market or so, then you should at least work in a way that you would be able to achieve this or the other eco label if you want to. Yeah? That's what I sometimes tell the printers. Yeah? It's not necessary that you have the eco label, but if a customer comes up to you and says, I want a product that has the German Blue Angel, that has Nordic Swan, that has EU eco label, be prepared. Yeah. So check your processes and run your print shop in a sustainable way. And sustainable means that you fulfill the criteria of one of the generally acknowledged eco labels. Yeah? And the generally acknowledged eco labels are the Blue Angel and the Nordic Swan and the EU eco label for printed products. Yeah. There are also some alternative labels that people try to lean to when they don't fulfill the standard ones, but this is another picture.
Yeah. So does that mean that if you look at, now you mentioned the Blue Angel and EU Flower and the Nordic Swan as three examples, does that mean that, let's say that I'm a concerned consumer that think that sustainability is very important. So from a de-inking perspective, does that mean that if you have one of these, let's say, accreditations on your printed product, then you're pretty safe, or?
Yeah, then you're safe, yeah. And the Austrian eco label, I shouldn't forget that, because they were the pioneers in sustainable printed products, even before Germany and the EU came up with that.
Okay. I have a question to you, and that is because when I talk to you now, this is the first time you and I meet, of course, right? So, but when I talk to you, you sound to me like a person that you really know what you're talking about, and you understand the process of the de-inking process. One of the things that you can always claim, and I'm just asking you because maybe it's not true, but what you do as a work, is that, let's say, only lab work, or is it also like applications when you talk to your members and the plants that you work with? So I mean, I'm asking because, sometimes you can be an authority just because you made a sample of three small pieces of print, and then it's like that. And I was just curious because, I mean, with all the paper mills that you have as members, I guess that it is important to understand whether you have that kind of, let's say, process in also when Ingede is or Ingede is doing in order to become the authority. So tell me a little bit about how you actually do your side of the work, please.
Okay, first, my background is I studied chemistry a long time ago, and I worked as a science writer a long time ago. So my um, background is science communication, and this is what I do for Ingede. I try to explain things that have a more complicated background.
Mm-hmm.
And Ingede, as an association, pools the money of their members to finance research on one side and communication on the other side. And I mostly do the communication of the research that our members do, sometimes together with research institutes. And Ingede, for instance, has developed certain methods to rate recyclability. There is the Ingede method 11 that has become somehow legendary now. This is the industry standard for rating the recyclability of a printed product,
Mm.
because it has the two key steps. Can an ink be removed from the fiber, and can the ink then be removed from the system? These are the two important steps. And this is what the Ingede method checks in the lab scale. And this method is being revised one time or another. Yeah, it's under frequent supervision, whether we have to change anything about it. And this method is what all these eco labels we talked before for printed products require. They require a positive test based on the Ingede method. And there's also an Ingede method to rate the removability of adhesives, because this is our other challenge. Adhesives applications that make sticky deposits in the paper mills. And you wouldn't want to know what the damages can be with sticky deposits. If you
I can
have
imagine.
if you have sometimes here we are back again with water-based. If you have a water-based dispersion, for instance, that dissolves in the paper recycling process, and then you spray this fiber soup onto your web to form a new sheet of paper. And then the water evaporates, and then the adhesive says, hello again, here I am. And then you have the tiny rubbery pieces of adhesives on your paper web. And then they stick to the paper, and they stick to the drying cylinders. And sometimes then the paper sticks together with that. Yeah. And then when you try to cut the paper later in the process and rerun it, then you tear a hole into the paper. Or
Yeah.
if it's very bad, this happens at the printer, not in the paper mill.
Yeah.
And so sticky deposits are a big issue, and for that we also developed a method.
So, so what I understand from what you say is that you are, I mean, that's not just your own claim to fame. It is also recognized what Ingede is doing, because you have all these research labs, but also because you have a membership-driven
Yeah,
organization. You
right.
basically face the problems of your members right away. Right?
Yeah.
If
Ingede is not an an association that has big office buildings and company cars and office canteen or something. Yeah. No, it's more like a chicken breeder association or something. Yeah.
Fantastic.
It's we have the working managers of our mills coming together, identifying problems that occur in the mills, yeah, and discussing how will we work about them. Yeah, it's not a single brain that talks about that. Yeah, I'm one of the few people who are just on the payroll of Ingede. Yeah, we have a general manager and we have me and all the other people working for Ingede actually work in different mills, and they join their expertise then in frequent meeting. So we have working groups. We have a working group dealing with the availability of paper for recycling. We have a working group dealing with the recyclability. We have a working group dealing with the inking process. Yeah? And they meet online or physically, exchange sometimes at certain mills. Yeah, we visit mills of our members and talk about how this and that works better or different from other mills, and so we exchange the expertise, and this is the most important thing about Ingede, that we join the expertise of all our members.
Is Ingede primarily with members from Europe, or is it a global organization?
It's primarily with members from Europe.
Okay.
A while ago we had even a mill from Pakistan, but they left us again because they didn't want to invest in the membership. And
okay, that's how it is from
often
time to
the
time.
question comes, why don't we have members in the US? Basically, because there are any mills in the US anymore that produce recycled paper from household waste. They all shut down because of the poor collection system in the US. The paper that is being collected in the US goes into board and to China.
A question, because I mean, you are an authority, and I think that, as I said, you have some weight because you are member driven. So the paper mills are the ones that faces the problems. From time to time, you hear about de-inkable paper that is maybe, or de-inkable ink that has not been, let's say, approved by you, or not approved, but applied to your standards and like that. The competition that you have, is that similar organizations in other countries, or is it more like individuals? Or I mean, because we're going to talk about some brands in the next episode, but from time to time you hear people that claim that their technologies is de-inkable, and on your website I can read that you say they are not de-inkable. So I was just wondering, both cannot be true, right? There must be
right.
some differentiation either in methodology or in process, or in so who's right and who's wrong, and how is your competition when it comes to being that authority?
Yeah, I have to say there is no competition. If somebody claims that and has no proof for what he claims, then it's fake news.
Okay, so that is what you from time to time experience, that when people say something that you have tested and that then basically you can depreciate it as garbage right away.
Yeah, sometimes there are maybe misleading tests. Let's put it this way. Sometimes samples are tested which I would refuse for a test. I don't know if you want to mention companies now, but
no, I think we do that in the next episode.
In one case, let's put it this way: in one case, we got samples of a certain kind that were more or less de-inkable, yeah. And then this company said, we are de-inkable, and it turned out that in real life these prints are all varnished, yeah. And the varnish is not de-inkable. So overall, this process is not de-inkable. And if we get any lab samples that do not match what is in the market or what this machine actually produces, this is
Yeah.
not the real thing. Huh?
Yeah. So basically, that is again, as we spoke about the different sources of paper when it goes into the production, it can of course never be better than the sources that goes into the de-inking process. So
Yeah,
if you have
yeah,
a printed sheet that is 400% covered by ink, of course it is different from a sheet that is only 10% covered by ink. So there's of course
exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
Well,
And we have also a difference in what you say with 400%, whether you have coverage or ink stack. Huh? If you have a page that has 4 sectors of 25% with 4 colors, that is 100% coverage, yeah, of the fibers. But if you
yes.
put these 4 inks on top of each other, then you have also 100% ink layer, yeah? In terms of a printer rating. But you have only 25% coverage and 75% are without ink. Yeah? So we always, when we test, we have to talk about coverage, yeah? Because we want to check how the ink goes away from the fiber and not how the ink pile goes away.
Of course. Axel, we will in a very, very soon make a second episode where we're going to talk about, let's say, some of the technologies that we see in the market. So for now, I just want to thank you very much for your time here on Inkies. I think it was wonderful. I learned a lot. So I want to thank you very much for your time here on Inkies. So thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for having me with you. That's a pleasure.
Of course. Bye-bye.